Hello, everybody. My name's Tom Stoukas, coming to you live from Sarnia, Ontario, on this Friday, rainy Friday in Sarnia, April 25th. And we're heading into the final week of the Canadian federal election. And yeah, it's crazy stuff. We got lots to discuss about this election. And the key thing is like the especially the last 2 or 3 days, people have been talking like on the news, like it's in the bag, the election's in the can. I was like, well, maybe we should have the election first and then, see the results. It's weird. Like they think the same Pierre's campaign's toast. Even like his own party, like Doug Ford and his um like campaign managers are talking like in the past tense, like, oh, the campaign was this and was that. Like it's like they're talking in the past tense, like it's over. So, and that's all the while the conservatives, a lot of conservative supporters, especially on X here. I don't know how real life this X is, but they're really lashing out at PPC supporters and people who are like-minded PPC people, but not necessarily belong to PPC. They're lashing out at them, saying, "Oh, you're costing us the election," but they don't understand. It's not us. It's not the PPC voter that's costing the election. It's the Doug Ford voter. It's the Tim Houston voter in Nova Scotia who are not supporting Pierre. So blame PPC all you want, but it makes no sense. So there's a lot to discuss, but that's where we're heading into the weekend is based on polling and analysis, I guess. And look, I don't trust polling, but I still have to. You still have to look at it because other people are looking at it. But people place a lot of emphasis on the polls, and it can gauge the mood, I guess. But you got to look at like the nitty gritty, like how the riding by ridings look. Because if the conservatives blow out ridings in the West, big deal. Like, and it shows in the polls. But if they lose the big cities, then it doesn't matter how big a blowout they have in their strongholds. So people, I think that's why people are analyzing the ridings, like, and seeing the path to victory is very limited for the conservatives. Especially that path to victory goes through Ontario. And Ontario's Doug Ford has basically very sour relations with Pierre. We knew it weren't rosy, but we didn't. I didn't think it was this bad. Apparently, I read an article tonight that they just do not get along, and Pierre rubs a few other people the wrong way. So there you go. Like, you got yourself a trend there. And if you can't smooth the wrinkles in your own party, how you gonna negotiate for the country? It's hard. I'm just playing like the analyst here. Like, especially in the election when all the eyes are on you and your party, and if you're a cohesive governing unit, and this is like the worst stuff that you could see, and especially in the final weekend of the election. So it's like Kamala, like Pierre's like Kamala now because he just screwed up this election, I guess. But I don't know. It's not exactly like Kamala, but I'm saying when I say Kamala, I say like the internal polls are showing Pierre's going to lose, and the analysts on TV are talking like in the past tense because they can't help themselves, I guess. So the same thing with Kamala. Everybody knew she was going to lose the last weekend. Like it was like, let's get this over with. But I still think, yeah, it's going to be like either minority or majority. Like that's really the biggest question. And if it's a minority, it'll be most likely give the NDP the balance of power, which I don't think the Liberals will care. They'll throw a few programs their way, throw them a few bones. But yeah, lots of crazy. Corey Tanecki, though, spoke again just on the final weekend of the election. He had to finally get his final round in on Pierre, make sure he's toast. Because they're thinking Pierre might lose his own riding, which is crazy, considering he was like going to be the next prime minister. He went from being the next prime minister to maybe losing his riding. That'd be nuts. That'd be so nuts. You almost feel bad for somebody. But, you know, maybe he got his eye off the prize. But Corey Tanecki made some good points in his final send-off to Pierre in this election. He said in this podcast, and we'll play it, but the main points he made were, A, they got rid of Trudeau too quick. They knocked him out. They took him out. They did the kill shot way too quick. Instead of like just stabbing him in the gut, letting him bleed out, they did the headshot. So they made him so unpopular, like they made so much effort, and they got him down to like 15% approval, and so the Liberals got rid of him, and now they're facing someone totally different. So Tanecki is basically saying you should have just bled him a little and till he called the election. So basically patience, and they didn't have it, and they're paying for it. And the second point he made was that how the concentrated their votes are. So they have tons of votes in the West, and that shows up in the polls. But what doesn't show up is the suburban and rural and urban ridings that they're behind in. It's not reflected in the general polls. So yeah, he made some interesting points. But he's not a Pierre fan, and neither's Doug, and neither's Tim Houston. A lot of conservatives. So it's hard. It's hard to fight this campaign when you got your own team sniping at you. It shows a little like lack of, as a leader, covering your flank, especially going into an election campaign. You got to make sure this stuff doesn't happen. Okay. So, and then Carney has gotten lit a little because they asked him about Trump talking about the 51st state. And it is observably true that since Carney has become prime minister, Trump is barely, I don't even think he's called him governor. Okay. And he hasn't talked about the 51st state. He does late, but surprise, surprise, in the last weekend of the election, next thing you know, we see Donald Trump in the Canadian news. And it's like, at first you think, oh, it's hurting Carney, let's say, because they're asking him about the phone call and did he mention 51st state? And Carney's, it's like, oh, he's admitting to it. But at the same time, what it does is it puts Trump back in the headlines, because this is the Donald Trump election, just like the provincial election in Ontario was the Donald Trump election. So, like, final weekend of the campaign, what better thing to have than Donald Trump in the headlines talking about 51st state? And then voters will say, who do you want, Pierre or Mark Carney? So I think it doesn't hurt Carney to have the old boogeyman show up at the last weekend of the election. I think that it's almost like they planned it. It's almost like this has all been planned. And like the fascinating thing with this Canadian election is even when it's over, there's going to be so many questions. It'll be like, will Jagmeet hold on to his seat? I might have been premature. He might stick around if he wins a seat and they hold the balance of power. He might stick around for 4 years. Oh my God. I could have been premature in calling off Jagmeet. It's like if the Liberals get a majority, screw Jagmeet. But anyway, it's like what's going to happen with Jagmeet? What's going to happen if Pierre loses? How quick are they going to kick him out? And who's going to be the next leader? That'll be interesting. How will Doug Ford handle it? Like, how will he be treated in Ontario? If Pierre loses, how will Doug Ford bear a lot of the blame? Will he get any blowback for that? How will Alberta react if to a Carney government? Will they go all crazy separatist on us and hold the referendum? And then Quebec seems to like Carney, so they might. But Alberta's the big question mark. And then the question is, what's going to go with the states? How will Carney deal with the states? So many questions after the election. But it's crazy. It seems like the obituary on the Pierre campaign has already been written. Just because they're saying he has to have like it's like the U.S. when the path to victory, like through the battleground states, it's the same idea. And his path is narrow, very narrow, I guess. And even the best they're saying he can hope for is a conservative minority. That's like their best shot, and that's even up in the air. But I ain't calling anything, but like I said, I've noticed this in the last 2 days, is the way even like politicians and news people and pundits and journalists are talking like it's past tense, and people haven't even voted yet. But maybe they might have got like some ideas from like the riding by riding analysis for a path to victory, but also maybe some top secret exit polls for the early, like the huge turnout for the early election weekend. Like, I'm pretty sure they got a lot of juicy exit poll data for those, and it's not looking good probably for the Conservatives, especially in Ontario, which makes sense why they would start talking in the past tense about the campaign. Just like when Kamala they had all the exit poll, like the internal polls showing she's going to get crushed, but they didn't want to say it. They didn't want to be the ones to say it or something. Same idea, I guess, but like the provincial Conservatives in Ontario have this data, and they know what the deal is, and they're leaking it. They're leaking it out, saying Pierre might lose his own riding. They leaked to the Globe and Mail that he might lose his own riding. I don't know if he will. He might, but the progressive Conservatives of Ontario are the ones leaking this information. Not the PPC. And that's the final point, is the Conservative Party, regardless, it doesn't look like they're going to pull it off. They still could. But let's say everybody else is correct. But I've actually predicted the Liberals just because, for my own reasons and analysis. But the Conservative Party is it needs a total rebuild. Like, I don't know what it stands for and what it wants. But if this is the third election in a row where it doesn't know what kind of party it is, so it's going to need a total rebuild. Like it's gonna need a good thrashing to figure out if maybe it shouldn't even exist. Who knows? It's not that new. It's not that old of a party. Actually, it was formed not too long ago as a result of party mergers and stuff. So it's got a long. It's gonna have a big soul searching episode ahead of it. Very interesting stuff to and the same thing happened with the Republican Party in the U.S. and they were losing. They were getting their asses kicked because they were trying to be Democrat. I don't know. Well, they're basically the same as the Democrats. And Trump came in and took over the party. Instead of building his own party, he basically took over the Republican and made it his own. So I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen with the Conservatives, but they're gonna have to do something if they keep losing elections. They have to do something, or something's gonna happen. Maybe other party, all sorts of things. So, well, very interesting developments ahead, I think. But these Conservatives, the supporters are led by all these influencers that really don't know anything about politics, and they're misleading their followers with basically just cheerleader rah shit instead of being honest with them, saying, hey, this and this and that. And they're crying like little babies because PPC exists, and PPC are people that are like-minded of PPC don't like the Conservative Party and don't want to vote for the Conservative Party, and they get all prissy and angry and like very psychotic almost because you don't want to support a globalist party that pretends that they're not globalists or thinks they're not global, but they are. And it's very weak as far as I'm concerned. It's like and it got me thinking that PPC supporters and others like-minded deserve a lot of credit because they say, oh, they don't have any seats or they don't win anything, but they deserve a lot of credit for shifting the conversation in Canada on COVID mandates. PPC and PPC like-minded people were really loud on the COVID mandates at the cost to their own, well-being, financial well-being. Mass migration, PPC way ahead on that, and a lot of basically the other parties are starting to steal little bits of it. Climate change, same thing. And the gender ideology, same thing. Like, we pushed the boundaries on those issues when the Conservatives sat and either voted for it or didn't do nothing. And Doug Ford still doing it in Ontario, didn't doing any of this stuff. So all this we did despite having 0 seats in Parliament or provincial legislatures, while the Conservatives who haven't accomplished anything for 10 years. And the Conservative Party of Canada it's pathetic, really. They blame people for their failure. You don't see the Liberals blaming the NDP for their failure when they lose an election. They never do. But these guys haven't even lost the election yet, and they're already blaming PPC. Meanwhile, Doug Ford has taken the Ontario machine off the table. Tim Houston is basically taken, Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, but it doesn't help his image that the Atlantic Premier doesn't like him. So maybe the Indians will come save him in, in Ontario and BC. Probably not. Maybe. Maybe he'll get a minority just from the Indians. So, but it's weak blaming PPC or people who don't want to, who are conservative, who not just PPC, but people who are conservative, but don't want to support the Conservative Party because they're not. They're fake conservatives. Like, what else are you going to say? They're fake conservatives. So, yeah, it's kind of weak. I don't like it. It's getting on my nerves. Like that Mario Zalayo. He's like a pleb look-alike. They both got the same weird-looking head. But anyway, keeps posting about PPC garbage, how garbage you are if you vote PPC. It's like, whatever, man. We shouldn't denigrate other people for their vote. Even if they vote for Green, whatever, you can't call people names. Well, you can call people names if they call other people names, I guess. But he's calling people PPC garbage. It's like, man, who died and made you the king of the votes, Anyway. But you have to look inward, Conservative Party. And a lot of this, I don't know, they'll probably write a book on this campaign, but they're going to blame it on Pierre's campaign manager and him, and that's it. And if they just pick a new leader and keep doing the same thing, they'll still lose. I don't know who's going to come replace Pierre. Maybe Doug Ford. Who knows? Maybe Tim Houston, the Nova Scotia Premier. Maybe Caroline Mulrooney. I don't know if one you know Mulrooney. But yeah. Final weekend. All right, let's go to this. Get this day through. It's been a long day. Let's get this done. We'll just go through the day summary. Wow, did I tweet this much today? No, I did. All right. First post here. Let's get on with it. So this was the story, the first thing today. Tensions with Nova Scotia Premier simmered as Poilievre made his sole stop in the province. So this is the Friday heading into the election. And this is the lead story. Tensions with Nova Scotia Premier simmered as Poilievre made his sole stop in the province. Sources say a top Conservative advisor reprimanded Houston's team last year. So they're on the outs since last year. And I guess she said, his campaign manager said, if he becomes premier or prime minister, he's not going to help you at all. And very bad stuff. It's hilarious. So basically, Tim Houston, is that his name? Tim Houston doesn't like Pierre, just like Doug Ford doesn't like Pierre. Him and Doug Ford are buddies, I guess. So that's the first story. Not good for the campaign. Vive Fry, next post here. Liberals have been promising Canadians affordable housing for over a decade. A decade. In that time, they have flooded the country with immigrants that the Canadian system is utterly incapable of accommodating. If you vote for the Liberals a fourth time, you're stupid, dependent on the Liberals for employment, handouts, or totally and utterly corrupt. Or a perfect suicidal combination of them all three, yes. Unfortunately, we are, like, not me, but we're screwed. Next post. Trucker convoy had 0 seats in Parliament and was able to end vaccine mandates. Yes, imagine if PPC or some kind of conservative alternative had seats in Parliament, like even like a little bit. They'd cause a lot of ruckus, I think. All right. Next post. Jagmeet. To stop Pierre, I put Canada before the NDP, Jagmeet tells the Star. I have no idea what he's talking about here. Oh, whatever, man. He says he put Canada's interests ahead of the Democrat by not calling an election, so Pierre couldn't become prime minister last fall. What a great guy. I think you were just waiting for your pension. Now he's not even gonna. I hope he doesn't even win the seat, man. I guess he's in like third place, so we can only hope. But knowing Pierre, knowing Jagmeet, he'll probably try and stay on, even if he loses his seat. Crazy guy. Next post. Yeah, some guy got shot at Toronto Airport. Crazy guy shows up at Toronto Airport with a gun, gets shot by police. We know it wasn't a white guy because CBC shared no information on what the guy looked like. Yeah, I wonder who it was. Look at that.
The nature of the call and the nature of the man's behavior could be considered possibly a little bit erratic, but I would say in mental distress.
Police say the man who produced the gun arrived in the airport departure area in a car with 1 or 2 other people, but didn't disclose whether he himself intended to travel today.
They're taking an extremely high degree of risk.
Whatever the case, this expert says a gun at an airport is an especially bad idea.
This is exactly what played out here. There would be numerous police officers in the vicinity, some of them very heavily armed with machine guns and rifles.
By mid-morning, beyond this immediate area, the rhythm of the airport continued. A few traffic delays, most flights on schedule, only police tape, a reminder of the violence that unfolded hours earlier. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Mississauga, Ontario.
Yeah, who the hell brings a gun to the airport? What a dummy.
I think it's a blessing for Pierre Poilievre to...
That's like the last. Here, this is an interesting clip. I saw this today, and this is another example I said about them talking like it's already over. Let's watch this clip first.
The leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I think it's a blessing for Pierre Poilievre to lose his riding for the reasons that Nathan has pointed out. I think if he loses his riding, he's done. He will be, he's losing the election. That opens up the possibility that Doug Ford will become the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And so if there is cooperation, I'm sure some of it is quite self-interested. I'm sure there's also, though, a lot of rivalry between the two that's opened up because it's not just Liberals that are talking about this, it's Conservatives.
So, yeah. I don't know what Doug Ford's... See, and this is another thing we talked about we're saying after the election, what's going to happen with the Conservative Party, and keep saying Doug Ford's going to be run for Prime Minister. First of all, he can't speak French, which whatever. He might try and get by that, but besides the French thing, I don't see him being popular in other parts of Canada, especially after what he's done with the Conservative, like to help engineer a Conservative loss here. How's he going to go out to Alberta and campaign? Like I don't see it happening. So maybe he'll be content. But I don't think I think he wants to become Prime Minister, but I just don't see it happening. At the same time, I never saw it happening, him becoming Premier 3 times. So, unfortunately, anything's possible. Because I never would have thought he'd be Premier, majority government 3 times in a row. Oh my God. So no doubt globalist trader Doug Ford wants to be the Canadian Prime Minister, but I just don't see it happening. I never thought Ford would become Ontario Premier either, so anything is possible, I guess. We'll find out. He looked pretty rosy today, Doug Ford. Canada's Minister of Housing refused to acknowledge the fact that the Liberal government's policy of mass immigration over the last 10 years has led to this housing crisis. It has. Even in Sarnia here. I see all these people from never seen them before, and all of a sudden they're here in Sarnia. Well, they have to live somewhere. It's a lot of houses. Let's see what he says about this.
Empowered to build and at
This
a
is
much
a
better
liberal
cost.
ad.
I think apart from Donald Trump, the most important challenge in this country is housing affordability.
All right.
And we have to do 3 things. We have to make sure that we are driving down the cost of home building so we can double the pace of housing construction in this country. And that means reducing
For
taxes.
more
We committed to
immigrants?
reducing development charges. We committed to lifting GST for first-time home buyers on new builds. We've committed to making sure that we are doing everything we can on the innovation front, on off-site construction, to make sure we're driving down the cost of home building. We committed to cutting red tape and doubling down on efforts. We got deals with 200 municipalities that are cutting red tape. We are rewarding those efforts, and we're going to double down on those efforts to make sure we drive down the cost of home building. And all of that means getting the government out of the way so the market is empowered to build and at a much better cost. The second piece, and this is, Heather intimated this earlier, but there have been decades of bipartisan neglect on affordable and community housing. And we saw in 2017 and 2018 through the National
let's
Housing...
just build more housing. That's their plan. We wouldn't have to build more housing if there weren't millions of people coming in. Okay. I like this cartoon today. This is exactly what they're voting for. Pierre couldn't close a deal. Either he threw the game or he's incompetent. So, big problems in Canada, but next post. Excuse me. Next post here. This is funny. I don't know what these guys are, TikTokers or something. So I guess they're going around with an American flag, and I guess they were at a Carney event, and now they're at a Poilievre event, and they had to get dragged out of there. And Pierre was doing his Trump. I don't know, like, Corey Tanecki keeps saying, don't act like Trump, and then Pierre keeps acting like Trump. So if you look here, he's acting. This is exactly how Trump acts when someone's disrupting he's like, get him out of here. So let's see what Pierre, let's see this. And it's totally, it works for Trump, but it doesn't necessarily work for Pierre. Let's see.
Mr. Carney want to tell lies, it's because he wants us all to forget. He wants us to forget about the lost Liberal decade, housing costs. He is the one who wants to get them out of here. 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 Right. Get out of here.
Scumbag. Dirtbag.
Get out of here.
I guess they were waving an American flag and they're just causing
Another
shit.
liberal stunt. Another liberal stunt.
Yeah. Funny. What people will do for clicks. All right. All right. Next, poly market prediction. If this turns out to be true, it will signal the end of the Canadian Confederation. Yeah. Dark days ahead, it looks like. It's not an easy fix here. The odds are in Carney's favor. Yeah, Pierce, I don't know, man. Like, he's got the Western support, but everything else is slipping away. The path to victory lies through Ontario, and it ain't happening, it doesn't look like. We'll see. Next post. Doug Ford. Globalist stooge Doug Ford is practically running already to replace Pierre as leader after sabotaging the CPC campaign in Ontario. Crazy stuff. So he's Premier for Doug Ford urges building new pipelines and infrastructure to make Canada energy independent from the U.S. So it's like he's campaigning now. It's so surreal. Let's see what he says here.
Our government is championing new building pipelines, seaports, airports, highways, and railways to connect all 13 provinces and territories, open new markets for Canadian goods, and reduce our reliance on the U.S. Now, for the last 7 years, I'll take responsibility of that, but every elected official for the last 30 years should take responsibility. So we're captive. We're landlocked, basically. Yeah, we have one pipeline going from Alberta out west. But just imagine if we had pipelines, again, going out west to hit the Asian market, going out east, right out to the Irving refinery, or make a pit stop in Sarnia to build a refinery.
Sarnia.
Or going north into the Hudson Bay and coming out around that way. We wouldn't have to be reliant on the U.S. and selling them discounted oil. And you always wonder, why is the price so much cheaper?
Yeah. He's going to support the globalist, the ultra-globalist Carney, who is totally anti-oil, but he still wants to do all this. Like, the guy makes no sense. Either that or he's playing a big con game. I don't know. We'll find out. Next post. So this is what we're talking about. Won't help Pierre Poilievre in Atlantic provinces heading into the last weekend of the election. So this is Laura Stone, who was kind of heckled by Pierre on the campaign trail. So she's getting her little chief advisor, Jenny Byrne, sent multiple text messages to Mr. Houston's office complaining that the Premier had insulted Mr. Poilievre and warning that Ms. Byrne would not forget the transgression. So yeah, this is the kind of team Pierre has. Look at this guy. Oh, I love this cartoon here. The Beaverton. Sometimes I don't like the Beaverton, but this one is funny. I'll give credit. Poilievre rushed to safety after actual journalist question makes it past security. That's hilarious. I love that. I have to say, like, with Carney, like I said, I'm totally opposed to Carney, all his policies, but he's been asked a lot of awkward questions on the campaign. Like, he hasn't been pussyfooted at all. Like, Kamala was hands off. But Carney's actually been asked a lot of tough questions. Whether he's given like satisfactory answers, probably not. The point is he's being asked. Compared to Pierre, he's actually not as protected. It's weird. Because usually it's the incumbent that's protected or whatever. It's a weak look. And then here's Evan Solomon campaigning in the center of Toronto. And I don't think he can. It's like impossible. Every campaign picture has been, there's no white people, just him. And this is the Regent Park Tenants Association. I didn't know Regent Park was in Saudi Arabia. Lifelong liberals here. I'm sure they're nice guys. Evelyn's like the tallest one there. All right. You got this in the bag, Evan. Oh, God. He's going to be a cabinet minister, too. Oh, my God. We're screwed. Pierre, you pooched us, man. And this is in more. This is the story today. Think about this. The Friday going into the election of supposedly the most consequential election in decades, and this is the mean story, is frosty call with campaign manager of your own party. 4 provincial sources who CBC News is not naming because they weren't, or whatever, told CBC News that soon after Houston staff received a phone call from Conservative National Campaign Director Jenny Byrne, who is Pierre's ex-girlfriend apparently, which is awkward, I think. The sources claim Byrne told Houston's team that if Poilievre went on to become prime minister, they would not lift a finger to help the provincial party. Yeah, that's not going to go off well in the Atlantic provinces. You don't mess with their EI. I'm just kidding. I'm not. Just kidding. Terrible look for Poilievre and company to be threatening a popular PPC premier. So this is the Friday story for Pierre. Instead of getting his message out, this is the story that's coming out. So first Ontario, now Nova Scotia, seems progressive conservative premiers are not fans of Pierre Poilievre and his team, but blame PPC. And this is another example. Next post is Jagmeet Singh. Canadians have spoken. I was like, what the hell is he talking about? The election's on Monday. They don't want a Pierre government. But we can't give Mark Carney all the power, because when Liberals have all the power, they ignore working people. So what he's saying in this tweet is the internal polls show Pierre's not going to be a prime minister, but it's too close to call a minority or majority for the Liberals. That's what the internal polls are showing. But the way he's talking is like it's already done the election, and it's just a matter of, oh man, that's got to be like some kind of violation. You can't talk like that heading into an election. Next post. So they're calling this today was Pierre's last news conference in Saskatoon. So, and when I think news conference, I think like Donald Trump. Like guys had like 20 news conferences during the campaign, and they were like long, like they're like an hour long. Like the news stations were tuning away because it kept going. So anyway, Judy Trin saying there are at least a dozen reporters, local and national, gathered for what will likely be Pierre Poilievre's last news conference of this campaign. We're in Saskatoon. 4 questions, no follow-up. Today's list: TVA, La Liberté, APTN, and Calgary Herald on the phone. So that's what I said. That's not a news conference. It's 4 questions. News conference is like saying you, or you, not 4 prearranged questions. So Pierre's looking a little weak there. A little Kamala-esque. And on the international news today, the eyes on Iran, if there's going to be a big bombing of Iran or not, or diplomacy. And reports are that Trump is open to meeting Iran's president. The same idea when he met North Korea and Kim Jong-un. It would be a historic meeting, of course. He's open to meeting. Oh, cool. And Israeli accounts are very upset at even the remote possibility that Trump would meet with Iranian leaders. They want war with Iran no matter what. That's what we're seeing right now. And their heads will explode if Trump actually meets with Iranian leaders. So we'll keep an eye on that. Next, Doug Ford's figurine. Yes. Look, scumbag. I don't see him being a conservative leader. If he tanks Pierre's campaign, I just don't see it. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. Especially in Alberta, they'll throw tomatoes at him. There. Here's another shot of this.
Get them
Pierre.
out of here. Get them out of here.
Look at these guys.
Get out of here.
Scumbags.
Decade housing costs. He is the one who wants to get them out of here.
So
Get them out of here. Get them out of here. Get them.
They're just like trying to get clicks for their YouTube channel, probably. Next post. Save us! You will not save us! You will save us! Yeah, they're just trying to get clicks, these guys. All right. Next post. Oh, we saw this clip about Doug Ford trying to get the sources in Ontario saying he's behind trying to get Pierre's job. I don't see it happening. Next. Mark Carney is the WEF closer. Sent to achieve what Trudeau couldn't. His primary objective is to introduce UBIs, CBDCs, and Chinese-style social credit system in a net zero carbon economy. This would be the end game for Canada, giving the state and central banks full control. Yep. We're screwed. Pierre's in on it, I think. He took a dive. He couldn't have screwed the campaign up this bad on his own. And here it is, another one. Media calling like the election's already decided. Federal campaign enters its final days. Mark Carney's Liberals appear set to win a majority Monday, according to Star's poll aggregator. This is Toronto Star. I don't know if that's the case, but it's just so weird. I don't think I've ever seen this like in an election so ahead of time. That's like they're almost biased, or like it's like a predetermined, like this thing's been called, which I've said seems very fake. But I think the Conservatives have played their role in being inept. Every election they face, the Liberals, it's like almost like their concerted effort. So I supported Doug Ford and his strategies up until about a month ago, but his targeted leaks and comments paint the picture of a shitty clandestine sabotage campaign on Poilievre for personal gain. He is no conservative. I don't trust him to hold Carney to account. So yeah, I don't see Doug Ford becoming conservative leader after doing this to Pierre, or even perceived to have done what he did to Pierre. Oh. And this is another thing going on besides in Iran, is India and Pakistan might nuke each other. But they get into argument every 5-10 years. They always have a little problem. And we always think they're going to nuke each other, and then they kind of calm down. But they always, it could happen. These guys are crazy. Every 5-10 years, there's like, oh, they're going to nuke each other. This time, maybe. You never know. How you'll know nuclear war started.
It's already started, my dear good friend.
What started, Mr. Leahy?
The shit blizzard.
Literally pushing.
The shit blizzard. I don't know if they'll nuke each other. That's a lot of people, though, they'll fry. That's like 2 billion people around there. All right. Look at this. Wanted. Good old Canadian boy. 50,000 reward offer for man accused of gunning down woman at Mississauga gas station. Yeah. And then here's the poll aggregator. Seat projection. So that's what we're looking at, seat projection, not the polls. Seat projection. And a lot of these are liberal. All of them are liberal majority. And here's an interesting story on what the problems of the Conservative campaign, especially if he loses his seat. It's an interesting article. And here they're talking about.
Tell us a little bit about
Poilievre's on CTV. They're talking about Poilievre's replacement. Like I said, like the election's already a foregone conclusion.
Well, maybe the question is, did he wade into the federal campaign, or did the federal campaign wade into him? Because certainly that's how some people in his party are seeing it. So he released this video, Vashi, that's been seen well over 1 million times online. It's sort of a takeoff of that Joe Canadian, I am Canadian bit that was done for Molson years ago. This is Tim Houston.
So anyway, they're talking about Tim Houston and saying he should, how he might be trying to replace Pierre. But like, this is what they're talking about on the Friday before the election. So, not a good sign for Pierre. Don't blame PPC, of course. And here's Doug Ford.
I can't tell you, but I told my...
Look at him. He looks really smug here.
With Scott Moe and myself, we're busting his chops this morning. I can't tell you, but I told him I love it.
Did people are interpreting it as maybe a dipping
Very
in
smug.
the waters of testing a potential future CPP leadership bid? What do you think of that?
I love. Well, you know something. Let's see what happens. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's see what happens on the 28th.
Wow.
But that's what I can say.
Very smug looking guy. All right. So, this is the Corey Tenecki point. And another point about the election is Corey Tenecki talking like this. You can bet he wouldn't be talking like this if he thought Pierre was going to win a majority. I don't care how much he hates Pierre. I don't think he'd be spouting off like this. So, pretty safe to say Corey's not too confident in Pierre's chances. So, again, Doug Ford's campaign manager.
And so I think what we have is a conservative. But to win as a conservative is not about getting 39. It's about winning 5 regional elections, or enough of those regions with what constitutes conservatism there, and not put so much pressure on those fault lines. And Mulroney did this, I think, largely through force of personality and personal relationships. But but getting to 39, if it's way over-indexed in the prairies, is not only not going to win nationally, it's actually going to be counterproductive in some of those other regions. And so I think what we have is a conservative party where a real conservative is a prairie conservative. Look, I'm a prairie conservative. That's where I grew up. I was a member of the Reform Party. I worked for Preston Manning. I get all of that.
So basically saying...
But I've also won campaigns 3 in a row here in Ontario. 3? And I know...
They don't have the Ontario votes.
Wow, congratulations. Fuck, I had no idea.
Sorry, and it was not as running as a prairie conservative.
I won 1 in a row. Does that
but it was a really good one. But it was a really good. Yeah. The biggest, because you touched on it, Scott. The biggest mistake of this campaign.
This is a good point he makes.
Was pushing through the most unprecedented in size and scope midterm advertising campaign, the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau down to the teens. And at a certain point, when you push a party to a certain level, no matter how in control that leader is, no matter how indebted their caucus is to them, self-preservation kicks in. And that's what happened. You know, we pushed the Liberals down to like 18 points at their lowest, and self-preservation kicked in, and they got rid of Trudeau. If Trudeau could come back tomorrow, he fucking would.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this guy did not want to leave. And, you know, had they pushed him down, which wouldn't have taken much, to 30, or even to, you know, 27, they'd be running a campaign against Justin Trudeau, and it wouldn't fucking matter what was going on with Donald Trump.
All right. So he's given like a post-mortem on the campaign, like it's already over. So I thought that was interesting. But he makes some interesting points. All right. We'll be here the next 2 nights because I'm sitting here alone. So until then, hold on. Until then, we'll see what happens on this election. See you tomorrow night. Thanks.